Welcome. You are watching Bring Your Worth TV. I am entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown, here to help you as a side hustler or a solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. If that's what you're into or where you want to go or where you are currently, this is absolutely your lane. You are in the right place. This is Bring Your Worth TV. I come to you live on Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time, here in Hot Las Vegas. Weather's kind of weird. Like you hear, I'm a little bit stuffy. It's been raining most of the week. We got some of that Pacific Northwest energy coming through. So that's what's happening now. But in balmy, usually balmy Las Vegas, you can subscribe to Bring Your Worth TV for free. This is episode 414. So you got 413 episodes regularly for the past 4 years. So excited. The camera's moving. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything, as well as the bonus episodes and the shorts that are always going. And also, you can get the complete Bring Your Worth collection, my 27th book. It's available wherever fine books are sold. You can also listen to the audiobook for free here at BringYourWorth.tv. One of the benefits of having your own publishing company is I can do what I want. I want to go and share the audiobook with y'all for free. You can watch it here, BringYourWorth.tv, at the link right there where my big finger is. Or of course, you can buy it at your favorite bookstore, as well as get signed copies of everything, including the limited edition Bring Your Worth mug over at DamonBrown.net. Definitely a coffee day. Hey, catch Bring Your Worth TV over at Twitch if you're into the gaming. You know, gaming's a big part of my history. Get into that. You can watch it on Twitch. You might be watching on Twitch right now. Say hello, throw something in the comments that you are. And also you'll watch some of the classic episodes over on Spotify and see what's going on. And Mr. Carlos, sunny here and rainy there. Right. I know you're based in Seattle. Go figure. Must be opposite day. Thanks for tuning in. Go figure. Because my sinuses are like, what is going on here? Damon, you moved to the desert. What's happening here? As it is with the rest of my family. They're like, why is it cold and wet here? We live in the middle of the desert. In case you missed it, exactly a week ago, we had the secret to stopping self sabotage. I've never said that out loud. Always have written it down. The secret to stopping self sabotage and perfectionism, because it'd be a pretty popular episode, actually was spending some time with my kids because they had some stuff going on. Got to have your priorities in order. So I did not have a live show last week, but actually our double feature of one of the more popular live shows over the last year. Evidently, it's popular because a lot of you are tuning in. I appreciate all the support with it. But it's a double feature about talking about self sabotage as well as to stop perfectionism. Yeah, for my research and from y'all that are experts, they tend to go hand in hand. Something to think about. If you happen to miss the episode, just watch the encore of the encore. The links are right below. You can catch it after we hang out today. Today's episode, keeping your momentum. I had such fun doing the thumbnail. Be sure to check it out. Shout out to Usain Bolt. Thank you for the fun with that. Momentum is different than just moving fast, and we'll get into that in a second. Momentum is what keeps you going even when you're tired. Momentum is allows you to stay in your purpose even when you're on a low tank. Momentum allows people to recognize that you're showing up in a certain way and you're doing it consistently. That's different than a lot of other things that are considered adjectives, such as moving fast and all that. That's not momentum. Momentum are those things, that energy that will carry you even when things are at their worst or at their most difficult, because they're based on ethics, they're based on a foundation, and they're based on movement that you've already been making. And sometimes that movement will carry you. Sometimes it's the people that are part of the movement that you created ages ago. Y'all are part of that. There's 18,000 plus of y'all that have subscribed over the last 4.5 years with Bring Your Worth TV right here. I just started this thing. I'm relatively new, and I appreciate that. There's momentum with some of the other businesses that I've built up over the last decade plus, and then that becomes the foundation of all the things that we're able to do in the future. So the more you're able to create that foundation, the better off you'll be as far as creating strong momentum. So today we're going to talk about finding your momentum. We're going to talk about rekindling or um, or rebuilding your momentum when you've lost it. And when is the time to when you recognize that you're actually going in the wrong direction? And I think that's a really key part of it, since momentum only matters, I think, when when we actually go to a certain place. So we're talking about finding your momentum. That's one of the biggest questions that I get as again, I'm a business coach, particularly for independents and so forth. I talked about this quite a bit in my free newsletter. It's every Wednesday, just like this show, at 5 Las Vegas time, as you know now. You can subscribe for free at joindamon.me. I talk about in today's newsletter. And it's a breakdown between momentum and speed. So to paraphrase briefly, speed is that classic recent startup saying that's actually moved to other parts of our leadership, where you're supposed to move fast and break things. That's speed. That's we're just gonna slam it all together. Things are left in the wake. You're not thinking long term because you can't. You're just trying to move as quickly as possible. The challenge with speed, aside from what's implied, where there's a lot of things that are left in the wake, as well as you not having a long term strategy with it. But the third problem with speed, as opposed to momentum, is that you're not actually sure where you're going. So you can be really, really fast. I got two little kids, they're 8 and 11, big bundles of boy energy all over the place. So I see this every single day. After this, I'm going to go pick up my boys, and they'll probably journeying all over the place. And that's the thing. It's like if you see like that kid energy, which kids are beautiful. I love kids. I'm so thankful to be a father. But they don't always have the direction. They're like, I don't know. I just need to move. That's speed. So you could be moving damn near in the wrong direction. It doesn't matter. It reminds me of people in traffic who are changing lane to lane and cutting people off, and everyone's in the same traffic jam. There's a lot of traffic here in Vegas. So I speak about this personally. So people are going back and forth, and then you look over and they're in the exact same place that you are. But they put all this energy because they feel like they need to do something. Sometimes we feel like they need to do something. Momentum is on purpose. Momentum is saying, this is where I'm going. When you get into momentum, then, like I said earlier in the episode, momentum ends up carrying you. But momentum is precious because number one, your speed will start to build up if you have the right momentum. If you have the right direction, your speed will naturally start to pick up. Again, talking about this show, if we want to get meta for a second, me showing up for y'all once or twice a week, every week, that's sometimes hard, but it's not as hard as it was in the very beginning. In the very beginning, there was no audience. You guys weren't hanging out with me. There was no show. And so I had to show up in a certain way. I had to show up with intention. Now, 4+ years in, then it's like, okay, we got the routine, we got the setup, we got the lighting, all that stuff. You guys are showing up. You guys are in the comments. You guys are saying, all right, when's the next episode? What can I watch next? How can you help me as a coach? That's momentum. So then, even again, when I have a long day or a tired day, it still shows up, it still moves. That to me is true speed. But to find that but you first have to find that momentum, which is why we're talking about this. Finding your momentum. Talk about a lot more in newsletter. Again, you click there for free, and I get a lot deeper into that. Shout out to Carlos. Appreciate you. One of my buddies. He actually has quite a few years on YouTube. Go and check out his stuff. Talking about video games as well as tech culture. Really good stuff. Be sure and check him out. We got into a conversation recently, and he was putting me on game as far as with how we're motivated. And it's based on some videos that he had saw recently recommended. Then I found another video that was inspired by that, and it reminded me of this book that I talked about years ago, and so forth. But it comes down to one basic thing. Again, shout out to Carlos again. Be sure and check out his channel. This fantastic, fantastic word, autotelic. I have 2 degrees in journalism. Carlos had mentioned this word. I was like, I've never heard of that word. And immediately I started nerding out. It's a Latin word, auto meaning self, makes sense, and telic meaning goal. Self goal, or I would call it self driven. And it's featured in the book Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I can always mess up his name. Rest in peace to him. He passed away recently. It's a fantastic book called Flow, which I mentioned in. I'm pretty sure it's in the complete Bring Your Worth collection. I mentioned in one of my earlier business books, which are all contained in here. most of them at least. And autotelic means a self contained activity not done with the expectation of future benefit, but simply because the doing of it itself is a reward. A self contained activity not done with the expectation of future benefit. You're not like, oh, I'm going to do this to get that, because then your motivation is to get that. No, no, no. Autotelic means you're simply doing it because the act itself is a reward. There's more profitable businesses I have than doing Bring Your Worth TV, like by far. And there's a lot of people that know you do TV program, particularly independent. You know, there's gaps in the money, there's flows, and all this other stuff. So this is not a reliable type of way, at least not at this point with the stage that I'm at. But I show up for y'all because I like showing up for y'all. There's other ways I can make way more money, but it's not about that. There's other ways that I could be on the stage and have quote unquote more fame. I could write more books. I got some bestsellers on here. I'm not doing that. I'm hanging out with y'all because this is a autotelic thing for me. Part of finding that momentum, I believe, is finding out what your autotelic thing is. That doesn't mean you do it for free. I don't do the show for free. There's lots of ways I get paid for doing this show ever since the very beginning. My whole point is that it can't be the only motivation. At least if it's only motivation, then that momentum is going to be dependent on if you have a good month or not. That motivation or that momentum is going to be based on if the checks are nice right now or not. You might not have that momentum and not even get to the point where you actually have momentum because you haven't gotten a paycheck yet. And so you quit. You're like, I'm done. For the first several months of the show, it was a lost leader, as they say in the retail market. In other words, I was making money, but it was based on me getting opportunities from this and then me getting money elsewhere. This was not the money center. This was not the money engine. So many of us, including again, I've coached probably approaching 600 different individuals, probably more than that at this point, over the past decade or so. And that's the pattern when we do things independently. If we're not doing something where someone has a traditional publishing deal, I've done a lot of books, it's a traditional publishing deal, or my musicians out there, shout out to y'all, I love y'all, where you don't get the pub deal or the music deal or the distribution deal, whatever, and you don't get that bag of money and someone supplementing your stuff, then you need to find some ways to build momentum. And that momentum is going to be harder, to be honest, because you're not going to be able to supplement your income based on whatever you're creating. I started the show, I'm middle aged. I started the show as a middle aged business coach who already had probably five different other sources of income, approximately. A lot of passive income sources. I've talked about that quite a bit on the show. You can do a search at bringingworth.tv. But aside from that, I have like maybe, I wouldn't say offhand, five different sources of income. So I didn't have to become dependent on this. That actually became the advantage. So now that I am making money, more money than before, with Bringing Worth TV and with y'all support and the support of other companies, then it's like that autotelic energy is already there. And that allows you to move forward in different directions. Yes, and passion's a big part of it. Thank you. Yeah, and I think passion is a big part of it. And that becomes the center. To quote another colleague of mine, James Oliver Jr., shout out to him, founder of the Parentpreneur Foundation, as well as the founder of Kabila, who's actually a venture capital fund aimed towards supporting diverse communities. It can't just be necessarily passion. It might have to borderline on obsession. Like I look forward to spending time with y'all. There were nights where I couldn't sleep, particularly early on in me starting Bringing Worth TV. There were nights I couldn't sleep. Having conversations also with Carlos, who I mentioned earlier, who's came through the chat, where I'm like, I'm up at late at night learning about AI. Up late at night, got the kids to bed. My partner at the time had already went to bed. I'm staying up, learning more about how to show up more for y'all. That's where the energy comes from. It almost has to become an obsession. A notch, I would say a notch above passion, to be like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I will be doing this for free. That doesn't mean you do it for free, but you would do it for free. Big difference. Again, as a business coach, I can't recommend you just do stuff for free for organizations or people, unless it's a nonprofit or something where you're doing pro bono work, which I have my share of pro bono work. Shout out to the nonprofits I support behind the scenes. That's part of my love and giving back. But that's not the same as working for free. Two separate things. We're going to go down the rabbit hole really quickly as far as autotelic. Again, autotelic is you not a self-contained activity that you are doing that's not based on some external down the road reward, but you just doing the act is enough for a reward. That's enough. If you want to learn more about that bigger idea, definitely check out Colin and Samir. Shout out to y'all. Hope you guys are recovering well from the LA fires. I appreciate the recent video you guys did about talking about losing your homes in it. So blessings to y'all. But y'all did a fantastic episode interview with Jack Conte. I met him a while ago at TED. Shout out to Jack. I appreciate you. He's the founder of Patreon. So keep hearing about join my Patreon. He's the guy that started it. Again, he spoke at TED probably about 7 years ago, right before the pandemic. He and I got a chance to have a drink. Really interesting mind. I always appreciate hearing him talk. Hope you've been fantastic as well. Colin and Samir are folks that focus on YouTube and creativity and how to monetize things, whether it's newsletters or, of course, talking about television. How to make it on YouTube in 2025. Don't be fooled by the YouTube label. This actually applies to a lot of folks. Again, it's part of a conversation that Carlos and I had recently. And Jack Conte, the founder of Patreon, goes back and talks about this wonderful video, The Long Game Part 3, Vincent van Gogh, Painting in the Dark. I forget the name of the fellow that's behind the channel, but he did a fantastic job. I believe his first name is Chris. I just watched the video the other day and it shared with Carlos, as well as some other friends, like, oh my God, this video is amazing. But it breaks down, again, the idea of autotelic and what it means. And that goes all the way back up to my guy, Mihaly. I'll just say your first name. Again, rest in peace. He passed away a few years ago. Fantastic book. I actually learned about it from my mother. So thank you. I learned about this book and the idea flow, God, 2 decades ago, ages ago, ages ago. I might have been fresh out of grad school. It was a while ago. And then I finally got the book. Unfortunately, I got it digital, so I can't show you guys the book. But I got the book. I read through the book maybe a decade ago. I bought the book digitally probably like 5 years ago. Again, I mentioned it in one of my Bring Your Worth books. I can't remember. If you do remember, throw it in the comments. That's the one problem when you write so many books, you can't remember which quote is in which book. So that's part of that part of old age. Um, and then I just got into the book again recently, as in the last week or two. I want to read it over again because of the conversation as far as autotelic and it being defined in this book. A flow state, the best example I can give is Michael Jordan. When, if you're part of my age group or you've seen the classic clips, I grew up with Michael Jordan, not literally, but of course watching him on TV. I was in in the greater Detroit area in Michigan, so the rivalry with the Detroit Pistons, I was on the other side of history when it came to Chicago coming to town. So I remember it distinctively well when I was around my son's age. My own point is that when you see Michael Jordan going for the tongue out, the alley oop, or the slam, where he's taking flight. He'll talk about that if you watch The Last Dance. Fantastic, fantastic multi-part documentary talking about some of the earlier seasons, but mostly in the final seasons of the Jordan-led Chicago Bulls. I lived in Chicago a little bit later. Shout out to Northwestern. So it's interesting to have that perspective on history while I lived there as well later on. There's a certain zone that he gets into. I get into that with public speaking. I have a keynote coming up in the upcoming days, and it'll be a 45-minute keynote. And even with the TED Talks I've done, my first TED Talk was 3.5 minutes long. It's available at bringyourworth.tv. It doesn't matter how long the talk is. It could be 3.5 minutes. It could be the upcoming 45-minute one that I have. There's a certain point where my brain kind of turns off. And I'm not worried about what I'm going to say because I already know what I'm going to say 10 seconds before it comes out of my mouth, like that long. It's just me and the audience. It's just a moment of clarity. And I'm not overthinking, but my brain isn't completely turned off. It's more like there's just a passage with it. I used to play sports. You have that with sports. I experienced that again with public speaking. I experienced that back when I used to program, way back in the day when I used to know a lot of programming languages. I find that with writing, where I'll be writing a book and then it'll be a certain moment and everything just clicks. That's what Mahale is talking about. He was the one that came up with the term when they talk about getting to a flow state. Aside from respectfully, the folks in the Far East and with some of the Buddhist ideas of that, and I've studied a little bit of Buddhism. Aside from that, this guy was the guy that brought it to mainstream culture and brought it to the masses outside of the idea of meditation and getting into a quote unquote flow state. This was the guy. So rest in peace to him. Fantastic book. It's definitely worth checking out. It is a heavy book, and there's some really good stuff on there too. There you go. And a bonus, the more autotelic places you can find yourself in, the more you can fight back against mundane, difficult trials life throws at you. Well, beautifully said, Carlos. I couldn't agree more. So it goes back to that concept of creativity. Shout to Chase Jarvis, who I first heard that from probably about a decade ago. You might have seen that in some of my keynotes. Shout out to him. And he talks about creativity being a muscle. I think a lot of things are a muscle. I think empathy can be a muscle as far as being kind and supportive of other people. And what Carlos is getting at, that it's a muscle as far as you exercising in certain things. So the fact that I didn't really become serious or become, if you want to call it paid or a public speaker until probably about a decade ago, around the time that my second son was born. That's when it got started to get serious, right? But me being able to get into that flow state when on stage or even speaking to y'all right now, that was easier, kind of like what Carlos is implying, because I already understood what it felt like to be in a flow state when I was playing basketball with my friends back in middle school, or when I started getting serious about journalism back in high school, and I knew what it felt like to get into a flow state, to interview somebody, for the school newspaper, and then to be a moment where the interview just clicks. I know exactly what questions to ask. I know what direction the person I'm interviewing, the interviewee is going, because I was able to have that in multiple arenas. Then finding that flow state as a public speaker or with the other as a business coach, which has started again also about 10 years ago. Finding the flow state knows became a lot easier because, as you're implying, Carlos, it's a muscle. And then it becomes easier to find that. Even get into a flow state as far as parenting my kids, which, shout out to your parents and nieces, aunts and uncles and other folks out there where thank God for flow states for parenting, because sometimes it is the very opposite of a flow state. And so, again, thanks for your feedback, Carlos, and for the great conversation over the last few days. Autotelic, the self contained activity not done with the expectation of future benefit, but simply because the doing of it itself is a reward. If you want to learn more about that, do the deep dive into the book Flow. Rest in peace to Mahale. If you're trying to get motivated or get more centered, I actually have all my motivational talks, almost all of them, in this package, Motivation to Change the World. It is listenable. So my time as an entrepreneur in residence over at the Toledo Lucas Library, which was the whole library network for the state of Ohio. Shout out to Toledo. My entrepreneur in residence there back in 2019. I believe my TED Talk is on there. There's a lot of stuff going on in there that will help you get ideally to the next level. And if you're trying to find that spark or why you're doing what you're doing, this would be a really good place to start. So, what about you? Where are you trying to find your momentum? Have you lost it? Are you looking for it? Are you trying to get your momentum for the first time? Let me know in the comments. And are you doing some autotelic stuff? As you can tell, I do a lot of autotelic stuff. I think sometimes we feel like that's a privileged position, but there's autotelic stuff we can do that, as it implies, does not require us making money or us getting an award for it. As I mentioned a few times, I crochet. I don't know what crochet is. I crochet, not crochet. I crochet and I do other things that I'm never gonna sell one of my blankets. I'm never gonna certain hobbies that I have, they're never going to be monetized. They're just in itself for the that doing it is the reward. What kind of stuff are you guys doing that's becoming autotelic? And how is that helping you exercise your muscles so you can be autotelic in other parts of your life? Jump in the comments. Let me know. I love to hear it. Even on the replay. If you're watching one of these chopped up or chopped up and screwed, as they say down south, and you're watching one of the reruns later on, let us know in the comments. Love to hear it and how these concepts and tools can support. I'm entrepreneur coach Damon Brown, and here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. If you're watching Bring Your Worth TV, you can subscribe for free. And right now, we're talking about how to keep up your momentum. And love to hear in the comments where your momentum is coming from and where you're trying to find it, and what autotelic things are helping you get that momentum muscle going. So, we're talking about finding your momentum. When it comes to finding your momentum, it really comes down to playing the long game. Playing the long game. The long game is looking beyond just right now. As we talked about at the top of the episode and in today's newsletter, you can see the link below over at joindamon.me about the power of momentum. When it comes to the long game is about what strategic moves can I make right now that'll make everything better, ideally for everyone involved. Being married is a long game, an infinite game. Playing a football game, as there's some great examples, I'll give the links in a second, as Simon Sinek talks about in his book, Infinite Game. Playing a game of football or sports, that's a finite game. There's going to be a winner, there's going to be a loser, there's going to be an end. Any type of partnership, infinite game, until the partnership ends. But the intention isn't to end the partnership. The intention is that I'll give a great example. I've co-founded a couple companies. Shout out to Charlie and my other co-founders I've worked with in the past, particularly with Cuddler, which was kind of the startup that put us on the map about 10 years ago. And we ended up selling that. You can go and have an issue with your marriage partner, your co-parenting partner. I've co-authored several books behind my big head over here. And so your co-authoring partner, et cetera, et cetera, you can just go on. You can go and have a beef with them, have an issue with them. And the next morning, they're still going to be in your face. You're going to wake up next to them. hopefully you're not in a ditch somewhere, but, but you're going to wake up next to them. And then whatever issues or whatever's left in the wake of that beef, that back and forth, it's still going to be there. You got a business partner, you got to still invest it together, no matter how much you guys curse each other out. If you have kids with somebody, so I got two kids. Doesn't matter what happens as parents, you still got these beautiful kids that are looking up to you as far as where is that leadership going to come from? It's going to come from you, you and hopefully the other people involved. That's the infinite game. A finite game is, Kendrick Lamar at the Super Bowl. A finite game is Kendrick Lamar and his beef with Drake, if you're up on hip hop. I've done some episodes on it. You can do it. BringYourWorth.tv if you want to get up to speed. That's a finite game. At a certain point, it's like, this is the victor. Okay, great. And then everyone's going to move on to the next thing. Infinite games are what we play with our lives. Me doing Bring Your Worth TV and showing up for y'all, that doesn't mean the show will be around forever. Forever, as far as I can tell. Doesn't mean it's going to be around forever. It means I committed to showing up for y'all Wednesdays live at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. I didn't say until April of 2018. I was like, no, this is the commitment. So the infinite game is really the commitment you make to yourself and to the people that you work with, the people that you serve. This ties into momentum because it's easier to have momentum. We don't have that finish line. We don't have that deadline. We just say, I'm going to show up next Wednesday. I'm going to show up for the live show. All right. That's the commitment. I'm not talking about the live show in November of 2030. No, I'm talking about the live show next week. And then when the live show next week happens, then I'll be like, all right, I'll show up the week after that. All right, I'll show up the week after that. What's the commitment? The commitment is I'm going to show up next week. That's a commitment. Does it always happen? No. Again, I missed last week because I had some family stuff going on, which, again, between y'all and hanging out with my family, I'm going to pick my family every time. Sorry. But because there's momentum set up, because it's based on the long game, then there's not that cycle of shame. You might have heard about this before. It's coming up recently. It's come up a lot with the government things going on. Ooh, it's a crazy time in the world right now. The cycle of shame basically means this: you do something, you feel shame about it. And if you watch previous episodes, you know that guilt means something that you feel bad about internally. Like, yeah, I should have showed up for that. Shame, that's guilt. Shame is, wow, I screwed up and everyone's judging me. So it's an external thing. Shame can be way more dangerous. Not saying they're good or bad, but shame, a lot of things that we've done for shame. And that's because we're afraid of that public ridicule. And in some ways, it doesn't even matter. This is the important part. It doesn't matter whether people feel that way or not. The fact that I missed the episode last week and I made a commitment of being there next Wednesday, and it's like, no, I can't be there. Guilt is saying, man, I wish there was a way I could make it work, but I couldn't. That sucks. Okay, I'll do better next time. That's guilt. Shame is saying, wow, the 18,000 people that currently subscribe to here are going to be so disappointed, and they're not going to want to watch any of my show ever again. Everything's downhill from here. I don't know what y'all think. You might not even miss me. I wouldn't be offended. That's okay. It's a busy time. It's okay. You already subscribed. It's cool. We'll catch each other next Wednesday. So it doesn't matter when it comes to shame. It doesn't matter what the other person's saying or what the society's saying. Think about what society thinks. There's major polls, from Gallup and all those guys, because I'm showing my age. Those other folks, they do polls now from, again, the Gallup like polls. There's social media. There's so many ways they're trying to gauge how people feel. Often they're wrong. So how are you going to know how other people feel about it? That begins what's called a shame cycle, because you're thinking you made a mistake or you did something that you consider a mistake. Then you're like, everyone's judging me over it. Because everybody's judging me over it, then I can't show my face. Because I can't show my face, then I have to stop and I'm going to quit to save face, which is where the term comes from. To save face, I'd rather quit. That's the shame cycle. And as that cycle continues, then you end up losing that momentum that we're talking about. If you're focused on the long game, shout out to Dory Clark. If you're focused on the infinite game, shout out to Simon Sinek as well as the authors before him that have talked about finite games versus infinite games. If you're focused on the infinite game, then that means you're going to get another opportunity to show up. Again, me missing last week's show, it's not a big deal to me, but it's a good example. Me missing last week's show, I knew I'd be back in the game this week. And I'm like, all right, hey, let's go. Sorry for the clap. Hopefully it's not too loud. It's like, let's go. All right, let's go. Ready for this week's show. This is how you show up. This is momentum. Momentum allows you to make quote unquote mistakes, to have not everything go perfectly, and to still show up for the next thing. I think it was Seth Godin as well as some other folks have talked about what actual habit forming means. Habit forming means you miss something once, but you make sure you don't miss it the second time. That's what it means. It doesn't mean you show up and have to do it every single day, because life happens, stuff happens, especially as you start adulting, stuff happens. Real momentum, though, allows you to take that one dip, make that one wrong turn, miss that one opportunity, and then show up for the next one with equal fervor. I think it was Winston Churchill that talked about real strength is losing and then still showing up with equal fervor and momentum. I'm paraphrasing him. Rest in peace to Winston Churchill as well. But that's the basic idea of his saying. And I watched a biography of him a few years ago on a plane. I was like, I was on a long flight. I was like, wow, you have to decide. You really have to decide if you live the life he lived, you think about the lives that a lot of us live. How is that momentum going to carry you forward? I believe it if it comes to finding out what the long game is, playing the long game, focus on the infinite game. My infinite game is support all the side hustle solopreneurs, other non-traditional entrepreneurs, as many as possible within the world. So it's beyond just me having a certain episode. It goes deeper than that. Exactly. Momentum can feed more momentum, but the trick is getting it started is the trick. That's right. I agree 100%. And getting it started, I think, begins like we talked about in the very beginning of the episode. Feel free to rewind or catch some other clips where we talked about finding your momentum. That comes from finding those things that are autotelic, those things that are self-motivating, that will keep you going, that aren't based on some type of immediate reward. The second level of that, I believe, is playing the long game, saying, I'm in this for the long haul, but all I have to do is worry about showing up the next time. I do daily meditations. Thing I have to do, worry about is I wake up in the morning and that I meditate. I can't think about how much I'm going to meditate in the next 10 years, meditating for many years. I can't think about the next 10 years. That that's a momentum ender. So the long game isn't necessarily thinking about where you're going to be in a decade from now. The long game is figuring out what exactly is my intention going forward. That in itself creates the long game. As I've implied and teased, The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, excellent book. Shout out to Simon. He talks about finite games, again, example of football, whether you're doing the British football or the American football, there's an end to it, versus an infinite game, like a long term partnership. And I mean long term, like whether it's to death to us part, or you guys have invested money together and then you guys are co founders. Yeah, I've done all kinds of partnerships. Those are infinite games because you can't make these quick moves. You can't just focus on speed. You have to be strategic. You have to show up regularly. Frankly, even when you don't want to, that's a good place to start. And I did a video really early on. I want to say, I don't think I have the episode number on this one. I would say it was episode 40 or something. You're watching episode 414. So you'll see me. That's gray hair, a lot more hair on top of my head, talking about Simon Sinek's guaranteed secret to success. Most of us won't do. One of my favorite conversations is actually related to the Ink column I did. Shout out to Ink Magazine, where I've had a column with them for the past 8 years. This is when I was really in my stride as far as the Ink column. So it talks a lot about what I was talking about in the Ink column. So what about y'all? How are y'all playing the 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 infinite game? It's like, what games are you guys playing? How are you guys playing the infinite game? And where does that matter? I love to hear in the comments. You are listening and watching, depending on where you're at. You'll be watching my big head on video. You might be listening right now on the podcast. Shout out to y'all. I'm entrepreneur coach Damon Brown, here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV Wednesdays live at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Vegas time, you can subscribe for free. You can get the complete Bring Your Worth collection wherever fine books are sold. And of course, links below if you want to listen to the audiobook. As soon as we're done here, you can listen to it over at premiumworth.tv. I'd love to hear how you guys are playing the long game. And if you're not familiar with the long game, how does that inform your thinking? I'd love to hear. And shout out to Saigon Coffee. Love you guys over in San Diego. Mm, tasty, tasty. that was not that was not a paid endorsement. I just rock with them. Shout out to them. Great family-owned business. Knowing when to change course. When we're doing momentum, yes, in the beginning, when we strategize and come up with what direction we're going to go in, that's a fantastic thing. The thing with momentum, though, and any type of progress, is that sometimes we realize we're not going in the direction we're supposed to be going. One thing that needs to happen regularly is some type of check-in. Does this feel right? And there's kind of two ways to look at it, two things that can change in my experiences. The first thing is that your intention actually changes. Your heart changes. Carlos had had chimed in a little bit earlier in the episode and talked about passion, and I leveled up and said, well, from my friend James Alvin Jr. over at Kabila and over at Parentpreneur Foundation. He just had a video just recently. You can look him up online, where he was talking about actually it going closer to obsession, not obsession where you don't sleep at all and all those things. You might need some medical help if that happens, but obsession, as in this is what you're driven to do. That's what we mean by obsession. Things change. I started my journalism career when I was just a little bit older than my eldest son. He's 11. I started my journalism career probably 2 years, 3 years, probably I was 14. Shout out to all my beautiful, awesome mentors back in high school. Whenever I started high school, that was around the time I started my career. It's been a long time since then, very long time. Those passions change. They evolve, they turn into something else. So sometimes when we have challenges with our momentum, there's actually nothing wrong. It's just we've evolved in a certain way. Or number two, it's not that we've evolved in a certain way, but that the people that we serve or what we're trying to do evolves in a certain way. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's just a challenging thing. It's time to move on. There's plenty of ideas, plenty of ways that I've tried to serve people. If you've coached with me, I know some of the stuff that y'all have been through. So there's certain businesses, ideas that we have, and maybe the audience doesn't want it. You got all this momentum, but you know, as a as my, the wonderful song "Express Yourself" says, everything don't mean anything if it ain't what you want. Express yourself, right? Shout out to Charles Wright. You know, so it doesn't really matter if you're not serving in that way. That's really in your heart because if your purpose is to serve and the person or a group of people that you're trying to serve don't want it, it doesn't really matter. The other side of that is when you actually do a mission accomplished. When we had founded Cuddler back in 2014, it was an app similar to Tinder or Grinder, which were way more popular, a decade plus ago, where there are apps where you connect with other people to hook up or for dating and stuff like that. This was to hook up with people for hugs. Cuddler, cuddle with other people. I'm really into intimacy and technology and how it connects people. So are my co-founders. So it was interesting to kind of go on that journey with them. And had a 250,000 users within the first few months. Got on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, and then our business got acquired within a year. I talk about that of course, in the Bring Worth collection, as well as quite a few times on the channel. If you want to learn more about that history, one of the reasons why we sold the business is I remember distinctively. I remember the morning. It was around Valentine's Day. So it was in February of that year, 2015. We were about 6 to 9 months in, and I remember having a Zoom call or Skype. Might have been Skype, one of the virtual things. This was before the pandemic, so it was a little bit more limited as far as how you connect with people. I think FaceTime was just invented. But I think we're on Skype and we're connecting in our normal morning meeting. It was early in the morning for me, and he was overseas over in the UK, so it was lunchtime for him. And I remember us distinctively to this day. It was 10 years ago, looking at him and him looking at me, and both of us being like, "Yeah, I think we're done." And there's ups and downs with co-founding and all that stuff, and usual drama and stuff like that. But that wasn't why per se. It was why. It was why. The reason was definitely need more coffee. The reason was is that on my end, excuse me, as a co-founder, my whole thing was I wanted to move the cultural needle to show that technology could actually facilitate intimacy. It wasn't going to be a Facebook thing, and they were just Facebook, not Meta at the time. It wasn't going to be a Facebook thing where you stay connected um, to people that you would see normally at your high school reunion and have a superficial connection to them. And it wasn't going to be the strictly physical hookup culture that was facilitated by Tinder and Grindr. No offense to either one of those companies, but it was going to be something where you could actually have platonic human intimacy, and it could actually connect people who were lonely or needed to physically connect with other people without expectations of sex, to be blunt about it. We're on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. We, among a couple other people, were told that we were creating what was called the cuddle economy. And I'll throw a link in the replay of this if you want to read the article in the Wall Street Journal. It was late December of 2014. No, I'm sorry, very early January 2015. That's it. I was like, okay, culture changed. That was my main intention. My co-founder, particularly my most active, we had another co-founder, but my most active co-founder, he had particular intentions and they were met. So it's like, okay, momentum is done now. We could have kept going, but why? When is it time to let something go? Sometimes it's time to let it go because your heart's in a different place and you've evolved. It's bittersweet, but it happens. I don't do as much journalism as I used to. And I got 2 degrees in journalism, heavily invested in journalism. I don't do it as much as I used to. You'll catch me here or there. I have my little chops. I'll speak here and there. I have my columns here and there, but that's not my main bread and butter at all. That's a change of heart. That's one. It could be that the audience that you're trying to serve doesn't want it. Been there before. I'm guessing if you're watching this program, you have too. So that's the second reason to change course while the momentum's not working. And the third one, which is probably the happiest one, also bittersweet, is that you actually did what you're supposed to do. From my end with Cutler, as co-founder of Cutler, my intention, again, I can't speak for my co-founder, but my intention was to change the cultural needle, to move it, to say technology can facilitate real intimacy that has absolutely nothing to do with sex. We did that. Cover the Wall Street Journal. We're on the late night talk shows. We're getting ribbed on the morning shows. Again, you do a Google of Cutler, Cuddlr. The internet does not forget, so you can see how much attention we got. But we changed the culture, and we got some money from it because we ended up building this company that was built to last. Great. We don't need any more momentum for it. Sometimes we end up pushing forward and doing things, even though our heart isn't in it, even though the people that we're trying to serve don't want it, or even when we've finished the mission and we're trying to pull defeat from the jaws of success. I think that was what's his name, my guy, Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power. One of those laws is you have to know when to stop. One of my favorite little ditties. It is a short, but it's full size. If you're into YouTube, you know what I'm saying. It's On the Dip and We Should Quit by my guy, Seth Godin. Hope you're doing fantastic. I was lucky enough to work under him in some of his seminars as well as to connect with him, actually through James Oliver Jr. and the Parapreneur Foundation, and actually talk with him briefly. So from afar and close up, he's a fantastic mentor. I love you, Seth. Very short episode. I think it's a minute and a half long, 2 minutes long, about the dip and when you should quit. He has a fantastic book called The Dip about quitting. Definitely check it out. But then, if you got 2 minutes to spare, definitely check out my conversation about when to quit. If you want consistency, do this and watch this now. The episode that ran, I want to say last summer, again, episode 380. So yeah, we did a handful of lives. So probably ran last fall. Be sure and check it out. It's another deep dive into consistency. I consider momentum separate than consistency. We get into, again, 2 degrees in journalism. I love the word, so forgive my semantics on it, but I think there is a difference. When it comes to consistency, that's showing up every day. Momentum is figuring out how you want to show up, and then it naturally creates that consistency. So there's a deeper dive we can get into consistency. If you're worried about showing up every day, definitely check out this episode. Excuse me. And then Dr. Natalie Nixon, The Creativity Leap, a fantastic book. I talked about it quite a bit. It's one of my favorite books. She talks about 2 different ways. It's a very small book too. You can read it in the afternoon. It's such a good read. Hope you're doing wonderful, Dr. Nixon. She talks about 2 different things. Excuse me, wonder and oh my gosh, what's the other one? Wonder and oh my gosh, rigor. Man, This Wednesday feels like Friday. Wonder and rigor. Wonder is, hey, I wonder if I can make a flying car. Flying cars would be fantastic. Rigor is saying, all right, but what's the fuel going to be on? Most importantly, does anyone want a freaking flying car? Do we really want to be living in the Jetsons right now? Or do we have other things to focus on? That's wonder. I wonder if I'm curious about this, I'm passionate about, etc. And rigor, basically saying, let me put critical thinking into this. Does that even make any sense? We tend to get out of balance and lose our momentum, tying it back to today, when we're focused on either the wonder where we're all over the place. Again, I got two little kids. So they're always coming up to me where they're like, Dad, why don't we do this? And it's some big idea, has no practical application, but sounds fantastic. And of course, I love them to death. I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Why don't you go draw that? Why don't you go type that up? That's fantastic. That wonder is beautiful. We want to protect that. I used to be a teacher, as you can probably tell, but we want to protect that. That's beautiful. But then you got to get to the rigor part. And the rigor part says, it's almost like the editor. It's like, I'm going to do it this way. Well, why? Is there any practical application for that? What you're trying to do is not financially feasible. It doesn't make any sense. And sometimes we get caught up in the rigor side and we don't do anything. So either we have momentum all over the place or we don't move at all. We have no momentum. This is a beautiful discussion about how to balance those two sides. We all have them. We're all creative in our own form. I know accountants and CPAs and all that, lawyers, a lot of my friends are lawyers, and y'all are creative as hell. It just comes out in different ways than, I have traditional artists in my family. I have photographers and other folks. They're like, oh yeah, that's creative. I have poets and stuff, and I've dabbled in quite a few of those things. Like, that's creative. No, no, no. We all have levels of creativity. Hopefully not creative accounting, but we're creative in other ways. It's a fantastic book to go deeper into that. But if I were to recommend any episode, and I'll go ahead and link that as soon as the episode is done, I would highly recommend after this checking out. If you want consistency, watch this now. It's another live show, again, from last fall, that I think will help you get to the next level. Are you currently trying to change course? And or if you've lost momentum recently, could it be because you've had to change your heart? The people or the ways you're trying to serve, that they don't want it? Or did you actually finish your mission and you need to come up with another strategy? It's usually one of the three I found. Let me know in the comments where you might be. And that might be the challenging part with the current momentum that you have. I'm entrepreneur coach Damon Brown, here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring Your Worth Show live on Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You subscribe for free and you get the complete Bring Your Worth collection available in all fine bookstores, including at DamonBrown.net if you want a signed copy. You can also listen to the audiobook right now at the link below. And again, after you watch this, definitely go ahead and watch the one on consistency. I'll go ahead and put a link right after this. It'll pop up on the screen as well. Yeah, let's keep the momentum. And based on that promise, I will see you guys live next Wednesday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. Until next time, remember, you can always bring your worth. You can always build from now. Take care of yourselves and others.